All right, so it is 6:01, and we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Councilmember Mayhew will be about 5 minutes, maybe 5 to 10 minutes late, but I thought we could go ahead and just get started. We will go ahead and note the attendance. The Councilmember Christensen is here, as well as the mayor and city administrator.
Maybe you don't talk.
And that takes us to the agenda. Unless there are any changes requested from committee members, we'll go ahead and approve the agenda as is. Seeing and hearing none, we'll approve the agenda, and that takes us to public comments. I do not see anyone joining us online, but I'll ask if there's anyone in attendance in the chambers.
There is no one in attendance in the chambers.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and close public comments and go on to the minutes. Are there any changes, Councilmember Christensen, that you are aware of you'd like to see to the minutes?
Nope, not at this time.
Then we'll go ahead and approve them as they are. And that takes us to our first item of discussion tonight, AB 23-097, which is the Pacific West Rail Model Train Museum. Oh, okay, different name. So tonight we're going to have a little presentation from staff about essentially where we're at with that. We have a potential lease that we're going to be looking at, and then we'll have a discussion about how we feel about it. It looks like Community Development Director Arteche is ready to speak.
Yes, thank you. My name is Emily Arteche, Community Development Director for the City of Snoqualmie. I'm just going to introduce the agenda bill for tonight. The proposed Pacific West Rail Model Train Museum would be located on city-owned property, commonly known as Gateway Park, at the intersection of Railroad Avenue Southeast and Snoqualmie Parkway, addressed at 7001 Railroad Avenue Southeast. Attached to this agenda bill is a draft development agreement and draft lease agreement that allows the project to move forward. And tonight we have our city administrator, Mike Chambliss, going to be able to present an overview of what the museum owner has in mind as far as designs and illustrations and what the building would look like.
Good evening. Thank you. Emily's trying to drop me to her department. Everybody saw that. Mr. Hamblin provided us with a beautiful PowerPoint. So we will start there. If all my clicking will work. Is it working? Yeah, there it goes. A little delay. Okay, so first few slides are some beautiful trains. Nice Santa Fe scene. The Western city he has there. Some Northern Pacific trains there showing our area. And then this is one of the first artist renderings of his design for the museum itself. Just a reminder that he's not seeking city funding to build this museum. He will be raising the funds and establishing a foundation for the construction of the museum on his own. But as you can see, you get to walk through the exhibits and experience them at eye level, but there's also an upstairs gallery that you can experience them upstairs. Another rendering shows the upstairs gallery area where you can look down on the whole layout. And this is much expanded from its current configuration. He's planning to expand it and let it grow over time. In addition to this feature, there's also going to be a meeting room. There's a kitchenette. There's a visitor area, lobby, gift shop, all are being planned. This is a view from the outside at the front.
I just want to mention something real quick here. For anyone who has visited the things as they currently exist in his basement, there are all kinds of things that are kind of tucked away in corners that you can't really see. So I appreciate kind of this upper vantage point that allow you to see a lot of the features that are currently kind of out of view.
Exactly. It also allows them to make their beautiful lands, mountains and scenery, much more taller and lifelike. This is a view of the outside of the front of the museum. Now, this view is kind of taken from the corner of Railroad and the Parkway. It's a little bit hard to see, but that's actually a corner of the building. So the building isn't shooting out onto the Parkway. That is a perspective line right there. So this is the side of the building. This is the layout. He's planning a large plaza, open space recreation area, a hidden brook, forest terraces, the plaza itself. There's some talk of possibly a depot in the future. And then the museum itself is situated right over here with basement parking. And then it also has it's currently showing an exit drive out to 202, which would direct traffic downtown. This is conceptual level and we need to work on all the agreements but it's a good design. Here's some more pen renderings of the front of the building. And this is a good shot of the front. The other feature is this open balcony, which has a fantastic view of Mount Si at treetop level. So it's really planned to be a great event space. So as attached to this, what the real action here, instead of looking at pretty trains and pretty pictures, is to consider the instruments that are attached as part of the action. So we have a development agreement, which provides 5 years for them to raise the funds and construct the museum and get underway and operational. And then there's the ground lease, and the ground lease is the instrument that would allow them to construct the museum on the parcel. The details of the lease is it would be a 50-year lease. Once again, we're providing them with 5 years to raise the money and complete the construction. There would be 0 rent. The property taxes for that property would be covered by museum operations. The construction and operation of the museum will be covered by museum operations. The maintenance for the 50 years of the building would be covered by the museum. And at the end of the term, the building reverts to city ownership. Those are the details of the ground lease. And then the third instrument in the packet is a gift instrument, in which he will be gifting his train collection, which is valued at over $3 million, to the foundation that will be operating the museum. So this is just an introduction of the item. We're actually going to talk about it tomorrow night at F&A and ask them to put it on the council agenda for the next meeting. And we have yet to get the final documentation from the other council. It was due this weekend. As of this morning, City Attorney Linehan had not seen it yet. We will definitely get that, but I wanted to get it on the agenda now so that the council had an opportunity for 2 looks at it. So the first look would be on the 24th at that meeting. And then the second look at it could be on the August 14th if you're unsatisfied on the 24th. The MOU with the museum ends on the 18th of August. So we're trying to get you 2 opportunities for success here.
All right, thank you. I have a few questions, but I'll turn it over to other members of the committee first. Councilmember Christensen, Councilmember Mejia.
Okay. Okay, you can go.
Sounds like somebody else has questions too.
So we need an interpreter for that particular language.
You can find a
Eric.
video of it on my Facebook page.
Chair, Councilmember Mayhew here.
Yes, Councilor Mayhew, go ahead.
Okay, so I think I have kind of a number of questions. I think that we want to try and address. So first off, let me just make clear, I think this is a fantastic project. So my hidden agenda, which is hereby not hidden because I'm stating it, is I'd like to find a way for this to happen. Okay, so just to be clear. So don't misunderstand my comments as anything other than that. I think in order for us to end up passing this at council, my own view is we need to document, not necessarily in these agreements, but document for residents and just as a basis for what we're doing, we need to document a number of things, I believe, that I don't see documented yet. Now, I know this stuff must be, you know, have received a lot of thought. So just interested really in kind of a conversation about my thoughts here. Do we need that? We don't need that, or whatever. So that's what I'm hoping to generate. The first sort of thought I have is, so generally when you think about a new not-for-profit or a new museum in particular, one of the concerns you have is, are these people going to, and especially when the entity doesn't currently exist and it needs to start with a big capital campaign. Capital campaigns are really hard for existing not-for-profits or museums that have a track record. They're even harder, I think, for brand new ones. So, and I apologize if it's in here and I just haven't taken it aboard. You might be able to point some of these things out to me, but I'm guessing that the construction costs are going to be substantial. They're going to be in the millions, I am assuming. And so I'm curious about how we've established the long-term viability and how we're satisfied on that. And I'm sort of telegraphing that I think there's likely to be significant concerns about that. So when I say viability, both, are they going to be able to raise the capital funds they're going to need? And more importantly, are they going to be able to raise the operating funds on an ongoing basis to function? And sort of what happens, and so I guess I'm sort of telegraphing. First up, I think we need to have documentation around all of this as we go through the process that speaks to all that. But secondly, then I'm guessing that just given the facts that we're likely to have significant doubts. Let me try and strike those words. We're likely to have questions about whether those plans will come to fruition. That's what I want to say, not doubts. These seem like fantastic people. They're very motivated. And so, but we may have concerns. Will that plan be able to come to pass? And if it doesn't, then what happens? So just thinking back, right now, so doing a little zig on you, so follow me. The property on King Street that was formerly owned by the city that's been sold to a group that's planning to put up a structure there. That was previously sold to another group, and that fell through and came back to us. So that agreement had a clause by which if they didn't build, I believe if they didn't build by a certain time, or the things they had to complete, and when they didn't do that, the property came back to us. So, what happens if they're not able to raise the capital funds or within a certain period? Doing another little zigzag on you, I know that the city of North Bend has had frustration with a commercial development property where they approved, I believe, a hotel to go up, and then it didn't happen. And they sort of had to deal with a sort of a property that was in limbo, and that this was a big problem for them because from a policy perspective, they didn't want that property in limbo. So this is a property that belongs to the city, and I think we wouldn't want it in limbo. And we certainly wouldn't want something where perhaps something was begun and not finished, right? So I'm just thinking, or I'm just wondering what we've put in place to kind of address, first off, just upfront address, here's why we think they're viable, can actually pull this off, which is going to be their plans, their approach, fine. But I think we should have that clear. Okay, we've looked at that and we find that not unreasonable. So we believe in that. And then if it doesn't work out, here's what would happen. So I'll just stop there. That's sort of, I've got a couple topics here. But that I've sort of written down as kind of the topic of viability. And what happens if it doesn't work out, and how are we to see? Just to close out my comments, I'll just turn over to you because I imagine you have a lot to say to those. But one thought that went zooming through my mind as I was just listening to your comments, Mr. Chambliss, was, well, if something is going to happen for 5 years, why don't we wait and do the lease, then enter into maybe a letter of intent, or I'm just wondering kind of what the thinking is as to how we're approaching this whole viability, why now and why this path, and what would happen if things don't come to fruition. Yeah. And by the way, I don't want to sort of push you into a premature answer. I think taking time to come back to us, if you wish, and give us a really solid answer, I think is a fine thing to have happen. So I don't want to sort of put the squeeze on you in any way.
No problem. I have a few comments and ideas, but yes, definitely we will take it back and give you full and complete answers. But going into this, there's a lot of exit ramps throughout the documents. And so what happens in 5 years if nothing happens, reverts back to the city. So there will be no limbo on this property. Either the project's going to succeed or it's going to revert to city property. If the structure gets built and it fails, reverts to city ownership. And we have a building, which could instantly pivot into rentable event space for the city. So I'm making marks on the plus side of my ledger mentally when I'm talking about this. Why would we go to the lease now and not in 5 years? Because there's a lot of risk and work that needs to be done, and they want to make sure that they have a home when they get that done. And I support that idea and decision. I've negotiated several of these ground leases in the past in my previous positions, and it's an important part of the process. The building is going to be designed for that space, so we give them a letter of intent, and of course we're going to want off ramps in that letter of intent. They're going to want off ramps in that letter of intent, and they're working hard and they get really close, and then all of a sudden somebody shows up and we trigger that off ramp and we pull the carpet out from underneath. I don't think that's the way that anybody up here wants to do business. So I really do support going forward with the lease now and this instrument, but I also support eyes open, fully have a lot of time to review it. That's why we're pushing to get this to you now, instead showing up on the 14th of August and say, hey, the MOU expires on the 18th, pass or fail. That's not the way I do business. Let's talk about it and work through it. As for verifying their long-term, viability, he's bringing the right team together. I mean, he has an A-list team. He's brought in one of the best architects in Seattle, if not the world. So he is not sparing any effort, and that instantly increases his credibility in my eyes. So was I really concerned about his business plan? He's not asking us for any taxpayer money, so I didn't think we needed to dive that further into that. I was more focused on the lease and protecting the property and making sure that there were no long-term costs to the city going forward. Property taxes are covered. The agreement, City Attorney Linehan, you have his markups. They cover our concerns. He and I met about it and went through it. City Attorney Linehan actually says this agreement really favors the city. So it is a really good agreement. So those are my ideas, but we can expand on them
So
off mic.
Chair,
ready.
follow-up, is that okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think, Mr. Chambers, that sounds great. I would suggest what would be helpful as this goes to council is a sort of, I don't know if the presentation or summary or some accompanying document, but a presentation, perhaps, whatever the sort of best way to do this. But I would suggest taking us through those topics and saying, okay, concern, they don't get this done. Here's how we've addressed that in agreement. We've got this and this, we've got 1 or 3 or 30 off ramps, and this is how they work. I think that's good for the council to understand. I would think, getting a solid understanding of that, and presumably we're going to reach the very same conclusion you have, which is this works. So help us get there just by walking us through that. And then that has the added feature of helping residents do the same thing. So I think, we're just letting everybody, know, yep, here's possible things, and here's how we've addressed it. So I'd really encourage something be put together to help to sort of accompany this as it moves through council that would address that.
Yeah, I wanted to mention something on that that's kind of related. The reason that I think that we should care as a council whether the business fails or not, regardless of city expenditure, is that the citizens would blame us for allowing a building to be, say, half built there and then delivering a failed promise on a cool thing that the public got really hyped for. So that's why I think that it matters to us whether this is a viable business venture. And I'm sure that as both interim city administrator and Councilor May have said, I'm sure it's going to pencil out. It'd just be nice to see maybe a breakdown of what the off-ramps are specifically.
And there are protections to prevent the half-built building walkaway. We're not going to do a Vegas thing.
Councilmember Christensen.
I had similar concerns as well, and didn't know if we should structure it as an executive session to go through the document with our lawyer and see specifically how those pieces worked. My concern was also that if there was damage to the building, or that it was built improperly, or there were structural issues, inheriting it back down the road in a situation where we're going to have exposure, litigation, other costs where we have to go back through and fix it. So that's kind of where my concerns were as well, just what the additional fees and costs would be once we got it back and we're moving forward with it. Generally speaking, I am really excited about the museum. I think it could be a fantastic addition to our community and for our residents, as well as helping to provide a boost for our businesses. And it's just such a fantastic opportunity, I think, for us. And then just, making sure that, again, it's going to be a really visible part of our city. So just making sure that it's a great representation and that it's visually appealing and everything along those lines as well. So that's kind of the way that I approached it. It is a very dense agreement, and I do think it would be helpful to both provide residents with the opportunity to understand some of that. And I think maybe also have a chance for us to speak with council would be helpful as well. Just cover our bases.
So So there are insurance levels required for everything from liability to property protections. And yes, I have experienced getting to the 50-year mark and in getting that building back. And the best thing to do would be to scrape that building and walk away. The key component to that, and it's in this agreement, is annual inspections. You can't just do an agreement like this and then just ignore the place for 30 years. You know, there are maintenance requirements in the language of the agreement that the foundation will be required to maintain that building so that we get a maintained building in that 50 years. I'm not saying 50 years from now you're going to get a brand new building. You're going to get a 50-year-old building, but a 50-year-old building that has been maintained and with ongoing maintenance should continue to last another 50 years.
I do want to mention also that there's the possibility that if at some point the building did end up being vacant, there could be another tangentially related organization that could be interested in that property as well. That could be an opportunity for use of the lot if this use didn't work out. Councilor Mayhew, I think you saw your hand up.
Yeah, so I think city administrator's comments and yours, Chair, just sort of segue into the second item I have on my list, which is I think I understand a key point that's being made by city administrator, which is this deal is structured so there's no cost to the city of this. I slightly take exception to that because there's always an opportunity cost to anything we do, right? Which means the opportunity we have at that property is to do many things. Once we choose one thing, we can no longer do any other thing at that property. We've chosen the one thing. So there's always, that's a decision. And there is a opportunity cost because you've precluded the other uses. So the one thing I would like to be able to, a thing I would like us to be able to speak to is alternative uses for that property that were looked at. Now, obviously, what we're using it for right now is, well, I won't say nothing because we do annually have, we do use part of it for parking, for overflow parking, and we do use part of it for in support of the scouting program's tree lot at Christmas time. So, but other than that, that lot is generally not used, which suggests to me, well, we really haven't identified any other use for it. But I'd like us to be sort of explicit. Did we look at alternative uses? And if so, why are we comfortable that this is the best use? As opposed to not having deliberately thought that through. So I think we have. I just would like to see that part of what we document as to here's why we didn't think to ourselves, oh, let's go build this other use. I mean, I could name some potential other uses, but I'm not going to because I'd just be picking them out of space. And the point is that, and then you'll feel like you have to respond to, well, you said we should build a gas station there, which, by the way, I'm not in favor of, but then you'll feel like you have to respond to that. So please don't respond to the silly suggestion that there be a gas station there, more just the general concept of why did we decide that there weren't other uses that we should be pursuing that this made sense to us. So just alternative uses. And by the way, so I think that should be part of whatever presentation or summary we put together around this, just to make that sort of a complete presentation so that when someone says, why'd you do this? And what else did you think of? Well, here's why we did it. And here's what else we thought of. So, but by the way, I am concerned about the building at 50 years. I really appreciate your comments in that regard, Mr. Chambliss, but I'm more concerned about getting the building back in 7 years or 10 years. If for some reason the organization was to turn out not to be viable on an operating cost basis, and therefore we ended up with that building, in which case we would have a tough decision to face, right? We won't perhaps want to continue it in its current and then current state, which is continue to operate it as the model train. Is museum the correct word?
Yeah, they are using museum, but we would get the building back. We would not get the trains are going with the foundation. So if the foundation failed, the trains would.
They would still take the trains with them.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyway, just laying out, here's what would happen if things kind of go south. And I think this is part of your exit ramp discussion, probably. Here's what would happen if something happened at year 7, or I'm picking 7 at random. It doesn't have to be the answer, but here's what would happen before the 50 years. Here's what would happen, prior to the building being completed. I think that's the different off ramps you refer to. So anyway, alternative uses. So I zigzag back to the viability question, just say not just at the 50-year mark, but before. And then the point I'm making right now is if we just document alternative uses that we consider for that site and why we are not pursuing any other alternative use, why we think this is the right use.
There were some pretty mature park plans developed for that site in the past. Obviously, they were not viable because the project's not complete. As a park professional looking at that site, I would encourage you not to put a park there. That is not a very relaxing corner in town. Lots of truck traffic, lots of noise, lots of traffic. You have trains moving through the area. That's someplace you want designed appropriately to keep the people away from the threats. And a building does a good job of that.
Yes, having run for office and placed campaign signs around that intersection, I'm very familiar with how, shall we say, busy and not relaxing it is.
Yes.
But I would also say, excuse me, if there is certain restrictions on that property. So that's why it's either a park or a museum, and I'm not sure what the other options are, but get back.
Right, Mayor, that's exactly what I thought would be part of the alternative uses. I think right up front, most possible uses are off the table because of those restrictions you refer to. So helping people to know that, well, no, we're not going to consider a gas station there because we're not allowed to do that, actually. So, but here's what we are allowed, and therefore here's what we chose between those. Chair, I have another separate point, but I'll wait my turn.
Not seeing any other hands presently. Go ahead.
So the third item I have written down is I think it would be good, and it sort of goes hand in hand with it's sort of related to the previous point, which is just, I think we ought to document what we think the benefit to the city is of doing this. So I think we all believe that it's going to bring a lot of tourists to town, and that will be very supportive of our local business community. And but I'd like to see us explicitly say that and put some information in as to what level of impact we think that will have, which very well may be a range, but and likely, I mean, I don't know if that's different in different seasons, but in any event, if we could just say, it just sort of answers sort of a simple question of, hey, council, hey, city, why did you do this? For many of us, we sort of might think, well, it's obvious. It's so dang cool. And it's going to be great for residents. It's going to be great for visitors. Okay, well, why don't we just write that down and say that as part of our presentation or sort of the surrounding, just and put that in. And then to the extent that we can sort of roughly estimate what that's going to bring into the city, I assume that they, as part of what they're putting together, have made some estimates as to what their traffic flow will be, how many visitors they'll have, and so on. And I think building that in and then just pointing out or documenting the impact that that's likely to have to our business community, I think then helps justify why we would do such a thing. By the way, one of the benefits to the city is we all get to go down to them, go down and see it. So that's one of the benefits, but there's, I think, even economic benefits and so on as well. So I would suggest that be part of what we sort of put together, which is, what's the benefit to the city?
I do have some conservative preliminary numbers over the first 5 years of visitors that have been projected, and they're projecting 25,000 the first year,
Holy smokes.
40 the second, 65 the third, 70 the fourth, and 85 the fifth.
Wow.
And memberships starting at 1,500 in year one, all the way up to 6,000 a year in year 5. So I view these as conservative numbers, but and I'm sorry if I left this out, but Mr. Hamling will be here tomorrow to present the FNA also. So there'll be a second opportunity, and he will be here present.
Yeah. So I'm presuming actually, although those numbers are even, those are much higher than I was in my mind, just saying, well, there's probably at least 7 people that'll go. But you have a number higher than 7. So it wasn't really 7. But anyway, I think I was pretty sure that, all of this is kicking around. It's putting this together into, I think, not just a verbal presentation, but actually a documented presentation that then is available for residents to go see, I don't mean like a recording see, I mean like documents they could look through that will show them, well, here's the viability, here's the benefits, this, just so that they can say, okay, got it, now I understand. So yeah, that's fantastic.
I'll go 7 times.
I'll go with you. So that's 14 already. Chair, I have one last question when it's my turn again.
Okay. Not seeing anyone else. Go ahead.
All right. The one other thing, and I just want to be thoughtful in how I introduce this topic. One of the great disappointments, and I'll admit I'm a bit Pollyanna and naive. One of the great disappointments for me in coming into city government is that looking back now, realize that I thought if you just explain things to people, that you could get everyone to agree on something. And I've learned that it just doesn't work that way. I have had a similar experience in my marriage, in which I don't always seem to carry the day on my point of view, but that's a separate matter. Anyway, I say that because I think it likely that not everyone will agree that this is a good idea. And that's okay. That's what democracy is all about. We'll listen to each other and we'll do it or we won't do it. But one group in particular that we think about and worry about, think about perhaps a bit more than even other groups, is our neighbor, the Snoqualmie tribe. And so I think we ought to, and by the way, there are things we have done in the city that the Snoqualmie tribe was not a fan of. They were not in agreement with, and that's okay. As long as we're listening to them and doing everything we can to incorporate their point of view, I think, that's, things go the way they go. But I think I think our intent is to sort of lean into listening to the tribe and demonstrating that we have listened to them, even when we may not do what they had hoped we would do, or at least not completely do what they had hoped we would do. So in that regard, I think if we could perhaps document our understanding of where the tribe is at on this, their point of view on this, even if they may not agree with every aspect of it, I think that's okay. I think we ought to document it, though, to clearly demonstrate to people, hey, we've listened. We may not have agreed, but we listened, and our understanding is this is their point of view. I think I'd really encourage us to include that in what we put together.
Thank you. Councilmember Christensen.
I had thought that I'd seen somewhere in the agreement where they were going to approach that in a way and work with the tribe. I can't find it now. I was looking for
It's
it
in the development agreement.
in the development agreement. Okay, but there was going to be some work there, because right, it's my understanding and I'm paraphrasing, but the effect of the railroad obviously was not necessarily a beneficial one for the first people that were here, and wanting to make sure that that was discussed in a way that was appropriate and historical. But I
Yeah,
really
that-
appreciated seeing that in there. And I think it's a fantastic point. It's important that we include them and that we're very sensitive to making sure that that's handled in an appropriate way.
Yeah, completely agree. So especially since we're doing that work in our, the likelihood that average resident's going to look through a 60-page agreement is low, or 60 pages of agreement, I should say, there's multiple agreements, is low. But therefore, I think to accomplish what I'm suggesting we do, which is in a more summarized document, putting in how we're dealing with the tribal input, I think is key. And in that easy to find summarized thing that we do, if this is making sense, if that's what we end up doing, I think would be just smart.
Mhm.
Make it easy for people to see that.
Yeah, I agree completely. Okay, other questions? Yes, Councilmember Mayhew.
Yes, I don't have any other points or questions. I do think this. I think that where we're at is well down the road. We have draft agreements. This is just fantastic progress. I think based on that, I'd hate to see us sort of get sort of squeezed, if you will, trying to hit the 18th of August. I believe that the council would be willing to extend the time period for that based on where we're at. And my point of view would be, let's, and now granted, the other, the group that's putting this together would have to agree as well, but I would be in favor of authorizing an extension of that agreement for an extra month or something, just to, not to signal that we're delaying it, that's not the point, but just to signal that, hey, mayor's got authority to add a bit of time to this, just so that we get all this. I'd rather do it well than do it fast. I don't want to do it slow, to be clear, but I'd rather do it well than fast. These kind of things, if you get kind of a wrong direction going, it can take just an inordinate amount of time. If you get a wrong direction going, meaning not wrong because I don't agree with it, wrong because someone misunderstands things, that can take a little time, more an undue amount of time to correct. So it's better to sort of make sure we don't let anything go crooked on us. People disagree, that's fine. But if they disagree because they misunderstand, that's something we want to try and avoid. So I'd rather give a little more time just to be sure that we kind of do this well. And I'd really encourage us to encourage you to consider asking for the council to just authorize the mayor to extend this agreement by a certain amount of time if she deems that necessary. I would certainly absolutely champion giving that authority.
Yeah, asking for, a month or so also isn't as bad as saying, we need another 6 months. Asking for a little bit, I think it's a little bit easier to swallow.
I think
Mayor,
we
were you
need-
gonna say something? Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I think we need to have the council discussion and figure out, what other, a lot of these things you brought up, we can address. They're either in the agreement, or you're right, we will have an overall presentation and a summary of the high points. And then just determine if we need to extend it. We may not need to, right? So give all the council a chance to provide their input as well.
Yes, Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, I completely agree, Mayor. I didn't mean that to suggest that at this point we, do that. I was trying to signal a willingness to do that and suggest that, if it would be beneficial, I think we can get the council to do that. It's not, I'm just, I want this to go well. And so that's all. I'm just trying to think of how we make sure to get that outcome. Yeah.
Right. Appreciate that. Thank you.
The only other thing I wanted to make sure to point out is that I believe that in the original presented lease agreement that there was some language for some of the approvals that would go to positions that either don't exist in the city or went to administrative people that perhaps could go through planning commission. I believe that we requested for some of those changes to be made. Is that correct, Mr. Chambliss?
That is correct. That's all part of the changes that we've requested. Where it's appropriate for it to go to the planning commission, we're asking to have the city manager designation changed to planning commission, and when it's appropriate to go to the city administrator, we're asking to have the city manager designation changed to city administrator.
Thank you. Sorry about that, got a little bit tangled up. All right, any other questions or comments on this item? All right, well, thank you, Councilmember Mackey. You asked most of the questions I was going to ask anyway. We got through it. Then that takes us to the next item, which is a discussion about the multifamily tax exemption update. And I believe that Community Development Director Arteche was going to introduce this for us, and then we've got a chance to discuss it a little bit.
Yes, good evening, council members. Emily Arteche, Community Development Director. In your packets today, you have a staff memo just kind of describing what this topic is about. I also have a brief PowerPoint presentation to walk you through, and then at the end, we can open up for discussion. So let me share my screen. Okay, then we have this box. Great. Yeah, this is the first time I've used this feature. It's an advanced feature on Zoom, so it's kind of nice where you can still use your notes and but focus in on the slides at hand. Great. So welcome, council members. Again, Emily Arteche with Community Development Director with the City of Snoqualmie. We've discussed numerous housing efforts underway. Tonight, I'd like to walk you through a series of slides regarding the city's multifamily tax exemption and opportunities about that. So let's start with a brief agenda. We'll be reviewing a brief timeline of the multifamily tax exemptions as part of the city's ongoing affordable housing efforts, touching on the state's defined residential target area criteria, unfolding actions listed in the recently adopted housing strategy plan, reviewing ways to find residential target areas, and opening up an opportunity for discussion. So let's get started. Our multifamily tax exemption housing timeline starts in July of 2021 when the state law changed regarding the use of RCW 84.14 multifamily tax exemptions. In November of 2022, we approved the mill site and PCI plan with a multifamily tax exemption status. The proposed implementing ordinance and Snoqualmie Municipal Code amendments to address this target are forthcoming in your upcoming August 7th meeting. This past spring, the city adopted the Snoqualmie Housing Strategy Plan, including a strategy for incentivizing new rental housing along with an action schedule. This was followed up by our recently concluded roundtable discussion on housing and the request for discussion on more near-term projects to address affordable housing. RCW 8414, also known as Multifamily Housing Property Tax Exemption, MFTE program, began in 1995 to incentivize residential development in urban centers, also known as designated residential target areas. Although this law was revised in 2021 to include 8, 12, and 20-year exemptions, and also limit the exemption to just the residential portions of newly constructed improvements, the criteria stays the same. Urban areas, meeting the needs of the people, and assisting in addressing the statewide housing crisis. As I mentioned earlier, Snoqualmie recently applied this criteria, identifying the mill site residential development portion of the target as a target area. This action is assisting the city in addressing the state's projected affordable housing needs. It also demonstrates to the state, the region, and the county that the city is addressing adequate housing needs provisions while removing barriers to housing availability for those that need it. Hopefully this looks familiar to you. The multifamily tax exemption is identified in our strategy as an action with city-wide use, as listed on page 34 of the recently adopted housing strategy plan. This action is aimed to address very low and moderate housing incomes within a short period, while a potential moderate to large impact with association to the city's current comprehensive plan, including the housing element, growth targets, and state and county projected affordable needs. Most policy discussions about affordable housing focus on the need to construct new units. And yes, the city is currently researching this opportunity with properties along the Snoqualmie Parkway. However, there are two areas of discussion. While increasing housing stock is important, considering existing stock is also important. This magnified building data shown on this slide is an example of a low-rise multifamily residential structures within one of the city's older downtown neighborhoods. There are other similar older structures in various areas of the downtown. Target areas can be considered for both new and existing stock, especially when it involves rehabilitating and/or repurposing existing housing units to better meet the current housing income needs of our residents. So that brings me to the very end of this short presentation, but the start of a discussion on opportunities for other residentially targeted areas.
Okay, ready for questions and discussion? Did my audio drop?
No.
Okay. So my understanding of this is that we are trying to help identify some developable land where the multifamily use tax exemption could be particularly useful. So there was a concept out there, perhaps putting together a map that has a couple of blobs on it, essentially identifying here are some places where a developer could use, there we go, that's much better, where a developer could potentially use this to help make a development with some affordable housing pencil out. Is there such a map at this point, or is that something that staff is still working toward?
There's no map at this point. It could become something we would pursue with the direction of council if that's something they desire. Perhaps something that can be included along with the housing element. Just again, helping demonstrate to the state, to PSRC, and to our county government about the steps we're taking to remove these barriers.
And if we didn't have a map that essentially identified these are the lots that it could be used for, if we were just say, okay, so citywide, this is a thing, we didn't have such a map, then identifying areas where it could be most useful. I guess what I'm trying to get at is, would the purpose of having such a map essentially be as an advertisement, so that a potential developer wouldn't say, oh, look at all of this land where we could use the oh, wait, half or 90% of it's in an HOA, we can't do anything there. The other 10% is in a floodway, we can't do anything there. And then they kind of throw up their hands. So essentially identifying those areas would be like saying, hey, this is a spot that's actually open for development.
Yeah, I would agree with that statement. It is a bit of an advertisement. It is a bit of a thinking out of the box. It's progressive. It could potentially lead to more affordable housing units, but there's no guarantee that someone would pick up and rehabilitate one of the downtown older, existing stock buildings and then pursue a multifamily tax exemption status for it.
I saw Councilmember Christian's hand.
Yeah, sorry, I'd put up my hand initially because I was going to comment that I think that a map would be helpful, but just making sure that as we're looking through both the existing stock and the buildable lands that we have, just keeping an eye towards what kinds of services we'd want to make sure we're available and local for folks to be able to use, whether it's some access to our limited transportation, things like services being able to reach medical appointments, grocery stores, things like that. Just making sure that as we're looking and targeting certain areas or certain properties that we're sensitive to what the ultimate use will be, so that we can set folks up in the best possible way to access that going down the road.
Councilmember Mayhew.
I completely agree with the comments just made. That's fantastic. I have a couple thoughts, but let me just start with this. I think one of my great disappointments in my time, my 6 years on the council, is how my perception of how little progress we've made on affordable housing as compared to what I had hoped for. So just a personal, disappointment. By no means should that take away from the amazing things that have happened during my time here. The Panorama apartments have gone up. The mill site development agreement has been put together. So amazing things have happened, but it's still not everything I had hoped for. So what I've experienced as I sort of think about why haven't things that I had hoped for come to pass? What's been the challenge? I kind of have developed the perspective that we are a small city. We don't have that many staff resources, and we have a lot of competing demands on the time of those staff resources. So, and all of these are terribly important things. So, and there's only so much time, we have as council members. And so, and there's only so much budget that we have. I'd love to have the budget of the county or the state, but we don't. My thought has become that what we ought to do in this area of trying to support affordable housing is kind of the old adage, how do you eat an elephant, right? One bite at a time. And so I wonder if an approach we could use here, should use here, because is this permissible? But my thought is what we ought to do, I think, is move quickly to approve an MFTE program that addresses the mill site, which we have specifically committed to that developer that we would do. I would narrowly focus this to just that property. I would do that and get that in place. Now, yes, think about, let's call it phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, but get that done quickly so that we have ensured the success of that project with regard to affordable housing element. Then as a step 2, and perhaps as a step 3, I don't know which is 2 or 3, maybe we should use other letters or numbers, but maybe we think, okay, now, how do we now expand what we have to add in existing housing stock support and do that as a second step or a third step, whatever order, but as a different step that we then expand what we did in step 1 to then include that. And then as an additional step, or maybe that's step 2, is we then look at other sites, which gives this discussion of the map. I think I get dragged into playing these video games with my children sometimes, and I don't understand for the most part what's going on, that just because it all happens so fast. And meaning they move fast because they've done it before. They went slow the first time. But in any event, evidently they have these things in these video games where there's this big sign that says, go here. And there's like this flashing target symbol, go here. And that seems to be revealed to me by my children as a way they learn to get through these video games. So I was just trying to be a bit amusing there and saying, I think this map that's being discussed is exactly the same thing. Go here. And I think that's what Ms. Arteche and maybe I think it's what everyone is sort of saying the same thing, which is let's give them the clues. Go here, look here. Now, may not pencil out for them, but at least they're not throwing up their hands and saying, there's nothing here. Well, wait a minute. Here and here and here are possible. So I think that's great, but I'd encourage us to move that into a separate phase. Let's, as quickly as we can, get a narrowly focused phase 1, which is get a program up and running that meets the commitment that we had for the mill site developer.
I would wonder if what's currently being drafted by staff does meet those requirements, and if there's anything else that it also meets, if we could just kind of get this done really quick to make sure that we're addressing the mill site, whether it includes other things or not.
Chair Johnson,
Yes, Community Development Director Arteche.
we are ready to take those steps at the next meeting with a resolution, implementing ordinance and draft amendments.
Great.
Excellent. So it sounds like what we want to do is get that step 1 out of the way, and then let's start working on a map maybe as a separate step with all the go here's and all that stuff. Anyway, Councilmember Mayhew.
Yeah, great news, fantastic. I would encourage us to just think about, I think the sort of phase 1 that I suggested, we may want to be very strategic about this in the sense that phase 1 has already gone through public hearing process. It's gone through council process. All of the relevant parties have weighed in. This is already something that went through a process and that we're committed to doing. To the extent that we add anything else into it, we introduce the possibility that there may be some, I won't use the word opposition, there may be, but more importantly, there may be just a discovery process, if you will, that either council members or the members of the public want to go through that may slow us down. And that's totally appropriate that we might do that. What I'm saying is, let's try and get phase 1 done quickly. And if that means leaving some things out, even if we're ready to go on them, if they might slow us down, I would encourage us, no, let's get done the thing that's already done, if you will, that doesn't need more work of that nature. Let's take that bite of the elephant and then quickly move to whatever we decide phase 2 is. But let's get phase 1, bitten off and done.
Sorry, kids are playing tug of war with a door there. Yes, I completely agree. And it sounds like we do have something on deck. So I'm excited to see what it is that staff will bring to us at the next meeting. And if
if there's anything that looks like it'll slow us down, we can always just take it out and tackle it next time.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this right now? I'm very excited for phase 2. Okay. There being no further business before us, at least I don't think so. Let me just double check to make sure. Mayor, did you have something? Sorry.
I
thought I
don't.
heard you. Okay. Then I'll go ahead and call us adjourned at 7:06. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Bye.